Hi, I'm Pastor Mike Huppy, pastor here at Saraland United Methodist Church, and I just wanted to take a moment now and we can remember something really important that happened on this day in Bible history. Today is Maundy Thursday, and this is the day that we remember Jesus last Thursday that he walked here on earth. The Bible tells us that on that Thursday, Jesus did some really important things. One of those things that was really important is that he washed the feet of his disciples that day. And then later on, it says that Jesus shared in the Last Supper with the disciples. And then later on in that evening, he was betrayed by Judas. The Apostle John tells us that this is a really important day, that Jesus began to show us the full extent of his love. Now, Jesus began to show the full extent of his love on this day, but we know that for the 3 years that Jesus walked and preached and worked with the disciples, that he was teaching them the full extent of God's love as well. Like you might remember the story of the Good Samaritan that Jesus taught about. Jesus talked about 3 men that were on their way from Jerusalem to Jericho. And of those 3 men that were walking along the road, do you remember how many of those men stopped to help the half-dead man that was laying on the side of the road? It wasn't the first man who was a priest. It wasn't the second man who was a Levite. It was the third man. It was the Samaritan. The Samaritan who stopped and helped the half-dead man on the road, a stranger, and not only just a stranger, but he was a man that was considered to be even an enemy of the man that was laying on the side of the road. It was only the third man who showed the fullest extent of his love. And we don't really know what was in the hearts of those first 2 men. We don't know what they were thinking, but they certainly didn't act out their love by showing it to the man that was on the side of the road. Martin Luther King, in his book, Strength in Love, talked about this story of the Good Samaritan. And he asked the question, why didn't the first 2 men stop and help the half-dead man on the side of the road? He said, did they not stop because possibly they were in a hurry to another meeting? Maybe they just couldn't be inconvenienced with stopping because they had a plan and an agenda and they had to fulfill that. Or he said maybe they didn't stop because philosophically they knew that it was important to love, but actually when it came right down to it, they didn't see it as their role or their responsibility to actually stop and help. Or then he says, maybe they were just afraid. And let's be honest, it was a dangerous road. People got robbed along that road. So maybe they were thinking what would happen to them if they stopped and tried to help that man on the side of the road. And we'll never really know why those men didn't stop. But I think that Martin Luther King really asks this really important question. It's like his gut punch comment that he makes in his book. And he says, the real difference between these 2 groups of men is the question that they asked themselves. The first 2 men asked themselves this question: if we stop and help this man on the road, what will happen to us? Will we be inconvenienced? Will we be in danger? And there's a big difference between the question they asked and the third man when he walked by. The third man asked a completely different question. He asked the question, if I don't help this man on the side of the road, what will happen to him? The third man was interested in what would happen to the man on the side of the road. I think this is a really important topic in this day and age for us to understand what it means to live out the fullest extent of our love. It's really important right now because what we see in the world is a lot of people are not experiencing or expressing the fullest extent of God's love in this world. In fact, you're probably viewing this video right now on one of our social media platforms. And if you were to go scroll up or scroll down right now on social media and you go to another post, and then you start reading the comments on that post, you're probably going to read some really nasty comments. And then people say some of the meanest things to each other. And if you were to go to flip on the television and start watching the news, you just see how divided our country is, politically and socially. You see, what I think the world is really good at doing right now is finding ways to criticize, to be negative, to put one another down, to squash those and belittle those with whom they simply disagree. So if you want to go along with what the world is doing, what I'd recommend is just joining right in. Start criticizing. Start belittling people with whom you disagree, putting other people down. But if you want to be radically different than this world today, if you actually want to make a difference in the world today, then I would recommend following in the way of Jesus. Jesus came to show the fullest extent of his love. And he did that through serving. See, Jesus, when he came not with like what many kings would have come, which is a gold crown on their head and carrying a gold scepter to show how much they are worth. Our King Jesus came and placed a crown of thorns pressed into his head. And he came not holding a golden scepter, he came holding a towel. Not to show how much he was worth, but to show how much we are worth. And I love the fact that Jesus would have asked a question very differently, perhaps like the third man. He didn't say, if I wash the feet of the disciples, what will happen to me? What will people think of me? How will they look at me? Instead, Jesus would have asked the question, if I don't wash their feet, what will happen to them? Jesus came to show the fullest extent of his love. He's a king that we worship that came holding a towel to show how much we are worth. And today I just want to leave you with this challenge that today you'll be open to the power of the Holy Spirit, that perhaps God might put in your pathway today a person or a situation where you might just be called to stop what you're doing, stop your agenda, something you didn't plan, maybe even to stop and get dirty, stoop down, and to help someone that God puts in your path, to help a person that God already loves. And so I pray this week, on this Holy Week, that you would be blessed, that you would follow Jesus, and that you too would be able to demonstrate the full extent of God's love. God bless.